Toxic positivity is an issue that's been going on in the games industry for so long now. It's just been continuing and continuing, and I don't see a lot of people actually talking about it. And by toxic positivity, I basically mean forced positivity. Forcing yourself or other people forcing themselves to enjoy something because it comes from a company that they hold dear. A few examples, at least in my opinion, would be when Cyberpunk 2077 came out, people kind of giving CD Projekt Red, like a leniency because they really enjoyed The Witcher 3, or people giving Starfield, again, that was riddled with technical issues and that is still riddled with so many loading screens it's unbelievable, passes because it's Bethesda. Or even game developers themselves just completely ignoring the opinions of a lot of their fan base because you know what? Who gives a shit about their opinion? We're still going to be making the games we want to make, even if they don't want to buy it, even though we are the developer, not the company that is wanting to sell the game. One of the heads of Gearbox Studios at Take-Two Interactive, Randy Pitchford, a man who is known for not taking criticism very well and just expecting people to support them because they've been supportive in the past, because that they've enjoyed their products in the past, that you have to trust the company, trust us. We're going to deliver, so praise us as we go along. Don't criticize us in any way because I don't like that. Don't give us potential respective feedback. Don't do any of that. I just want to hear, this is a good idea, this is a good idea. And then it even gets to a point where you block the people who are criticizing and critiquing your work because they don't think it's going to be as good as your previous iterations of the same game that you've been developing for about, a decade and a half now. The post that really gets me from Randy Pitchford that was actually this month on the 2nd of March is, I didn't see any critique. I just saw shitty negativity that was demotivating. You want the best Borderlands? Root for us and cheer us on. If you take developers' passion for granted, we'll all pay the price. I love criticism, and thankfully, I have never been in short supply. Don't gaslight me on this post. It wasn't criticism, it was pessimism. It's toxic for people killing themselves for your entertainment, so fuck that noise. And keep in mind, this wasn't even a response to someone directly. This is a response to someone else's, just kind of overview of what happened on a live stream. The attitude from Randy Pitchford in that entire tweet was, look, I can't do no wrong. I can't. You can't critique the games that I develop because I put my heart into it. Because I care about what I develop, even though, yeah, you can put your heart into something where we can still critique it when people don't think it looks good, or when we might believe it looks worse than your predecessors that you've literally created. It screams, please trust me, please give me your money, please believe that I'm going to build a product that you are going to love without actually having, any sort of, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what we're going to do differently from our predecessor because, hey, I know you guys maybe didn't like the villains in Borderlands 3. This is what we're doing to fix that in Borderlands 4. They've done none of that. Instead, Randy Pitchford is acting extremely cocky for very little reason and expecting people to support the game because it's Borderlands, because it's Gearbox. At least coming from me personally, this is not a good look. This isn't a good look on a PR standpoint. This isn't a good look on any developer or company standpoint, and I'm amazed that Take-Two Interactive, a company that is known for making a lot of money, is so okay with their CEO of Gearbox just shit-talking and arguing with people on Twitter over their criticisms of his game. Ignore it if you don't want to see the criticism, but don't argue with people online. And that doesn't even just stick with the Borderlands video games. Randy Pitchford has also left his opinion on the Borderlands movie as well, saying that it was amazing and that, he was loving it. Everyone in the theater was loving it, even though I'm pretty sure it didn't even scrape past $20 million made in the box office. That's just what I remember when I'm pulling out of my ass here. But it was a flop of a movie. Even with a lot of big A-name actors, it was a huge, colossal failure for the company that developed and made the movie, and I'm pretty sure Randy Pitchford could not have been happy about, his baby, his IP, his, golden child being turned into a movie adaptation and flopping so horribly hard that it would have just made more sense to make, a spin-off game. But leaving the whole section of Randy Pitchford, you know that it's forced positivity when you have cocky game developers. And I really feel like the cockiest game developers are the developers at Naughty Dog. Because The Last of Us 2, we can definitely say, whether you've loved it or hate it, was a big, giant, controversial game. Whether if it was the story, whether if it was how they handled a character's death, whether if it was, any sort of sense of what the hell they were doing in that game. I personally enjoyed it. Probably not to the extent I would have if they did some different story tropes, but there was a lot of controversy surrounding the game. So you'd think as a developer that is underneath a company like Sony Interactive Entertainment, and this company wants to make money, right? You want to care about people's opinion. You want to have the mass people's opinion. You want to try to get a 90-10 split. You want 10% maybe to not like it. Well, preferably you want 100% to like it, but you have to leave it somewhere. So you're going to say, hey, maybe next time try to do something that isn't as fucking stupid as killing off, the series' favorite character in the first 2 hours, right? Let's try something new. You know what the developers actually have to say about that?
Funny, it's like I joke about this with the team. It's like, oh, we made a game with The Last of Us 2. We made certain creative decisions. That got us a lot of hate. A lot of people love it, but a lot of people hate that game.
Who gives a shit?
The people who pay you give a shit. You cannot like you're some all high and mighty developer that can't do no wrong, that's going to be selling hundreds of millions of dollars worth of copies no matter what you do, no matter what story tropes you decide to go down. People are pissed about how you handle The Last of Us 2, and that will 100% reflect on your next game's sales. They will not trust you as they did with the first Last of Us and with Uncharted. They will be skeptical, and that will definitely affect sales. The way The Last of Us 2 ended up, more likely than not, affected a lot of the game sales, and I imagine in the end, Sony must not have been happy about that, and Sony isn't going to be happy about developers who have this mindset of, who gives a shit what the player thinks about our games, right? They're not the ones buying it or anything, and that is exactly the problem I have. It is the toxic positivity of game developers and just the people in the industry. They don't give a shit what the player thinks. Look, we sold copies. 50% of the players might not have liked The Last of Us 2. Who gives a shit? The other 50% did. Why would we do something better for our next game? Fuck those guys. We don't care what they think because you fuck them, right? We are a positive studio. We want to do no wrong. We do no wrong, right? We are fucking Naughty Dog. We do the best games. We have the best everything. We're fucking Naughty Dog. We're under Sony. It's that sort of toxic positivity that you see in the games industry, and that also reflected off of other Sony studios. Concord, for example. You're telling me in 8 years of development and over $400 million, at least on an estimate on the analysts, guessing of how much that game costs, $400 million in 8 years of development, that is what they had to come up with? That is what they had to come up with. No one in the studio was like, hey, maybe let's not do a hero shooter that costs $40 in a industry and a market that is already so oversaturated with other free-to-play hero shooters. And I would argue one of the worst offenders when it comes to toxic positivity in the games industry is Bethesda's own lead writer, Emil Pagliaro, when he wrote a 15-post-long thread about how you should not be so mean about Starfield, about how developers put their heart and soul to it, so you should not criticize it the way that you are. We put a lot of time into this. You should enjoy. You should just consume, because we put our heart into it. When you have the lead writer of your game studio making 15 post-long threads about how you can't do no wrong because we put our hearts into it. I know you're a consumer, but you should still enjoy our products anyway because Bethesda is full of passionate developers. It screams, again, like I've notioned in this video, toxic positivity. It is a big problem in the games industry, and I've just given you 3 reasons, or 3 variations of 3 different studios, Gearbox, Naughty Dog, and Bethesda, on this toxic positivity bullshit that we realistically should not be seeing in an industry that has been failing. Not failing in the way of, hey, the industry is bigger than ever in terms of money, but so many developers are being laid off, so many studios are being shut down. Every single day, people have to go into their work at a game studio not knowing if they'll have a job the next day because of how bad the industry is right now, because of games not selling. But then you have games that do sell. For example, Space Marine 2, a game that sold 5 million copies and gameplay that you're watching right now. This is the example of a game that does not need a toxic positivity, because it's just a good game. And that's realistically where this all started from. Just poorly done games. And I'm not calling Last of Us 2, I'm not calling Borderlands, or even I'm gonna call Starfield like a poor game, but I'm not saying that they're completely dogshit games. I'm saying that they're just not up to the standard of previously released titles coming from these studios. And these studios, because they've been in the industry for so long, expect people to just go out and buy them because of namesake. Naughty Dog is going to expect people to go out and buy the Intergalactic Last Heretic game because it's Naughty Dog. This is a brand new intellectual property, and Naughty Dog is banking on the idea that you're going to go out and buy Intergalactic Heretic Prophet because it's from Naughty Dog. Gearbox is banking on the idea that you're going to go out and buy Borderlands 4 because you enjoyed Borderlands 3, 2, and 1. Bethesda's banking on the idea, and this is true, that you were going to buy Starfield because that's a big new space gaming. It's the biggest game that they've ever done. They reiterated that so many times, and it sold well, and it also had a lot of players. But just because Borderlands 3 had the biggest launch of all time for a Borderlands game, just because The Last of Us 2 sold more copies than any other Naughty Dog game, and just because Starfield reached 6 million players in its first few days on an exclusivity contract realistically with just Xbox and PC, does not take away from the criticisms that comes to The Last of Us, that comes to Borderlands, and that comes to Starfield or any other title created under those companies. But yet, these companies think that they can't do any wrong. People that buy these games on a continuous basis don't think that these companies can do any wrong. They just want to consume. They just want to expect the same slop that they've been expecting for the past decade. They don't want these companies to innovate because realistically, you come to me with what was innovative about The Last of Us 2. I'd like you to leave in the comments if you have an idea what was new about that game compared to The Last of Us 1. What was realistically new about Starfield and at least core gameplay Bethesda design compared to their previous games? At least in my opinion, not much. And you know what? I enjoyed playing those games. I enjoyed playing Borderlands 3, I enjoyed playing Starfield, and I enjoyed playing The Last of Us 2 and 1. But I'm not going to pretend like they were fantastic video games, and I'm not going to blow smoke up these developers' asses because they are Naughty Dog, because they're Gearbox, because they're Bethesda, because all of these developers have been in the industry for 20 years. They expect players to just come out and buy their games. And we can even exclude Gearbox, Naughty Dog, and Bethesda. So many other studios, so many other publishers in the industry believe that they should just have their games bought because of namesake. BioWare is the greatest example of this probably. The toxic positivity that comes into BioWare, and I even covered anything in relation to Dragon Age the Veilguard because that would probably triple the length of this video alone. But toxic positivity is definitely a problem at that studio, and hopefully it's being rehashed and fixed, and hopefully the managerial aspect of that studio has been completely changed because I would like to see BioWare succeed. I would like to see Gearbox, Naughty Dog, and Bethesda all succeed. I would like to see them produce games that are worthy of that $70 price tag. Because when we have developers like Focus Home, when we have developers like Arrowhead that are producing absolute bangers like Space Marine, like Helldivers, like Balatro, an indie gem, when we have smaller based developers that are creating better experiences than the stuff the big AAA developers are creating, I just don't see why people and why these publishers specifically would expect people to actually go out and buy their games when we have people who are making games on smaller budgets, but also they're so much more fun. But I want to end it here because I've been going on a little bit of a rant for far too long. But if you did enjoy this video, consider leaving a like, sharing, commenting, and subscribing if you so choose to. Thank you all for listening to me rant, and I'll see you guys in the next video.